Take two. Alright, so we're in the episode 2 of Demented Debate Society, or DDS.
So, you want to introduce yourself?
Okay, my name is Billy.
My name's Vance.
My name's Denise.
And I'm Scott.
Okay.
So today we're gonna talk about DR95 because they've been getting a lot of heat from DFW. It's probably, we'll probably upload this late, so you probably forgot about the issue at this point. But we're still posting it because we like it.
Nice.
Alright, so what is DR95?
It's supposed to be a podcast where a bunch of people discuss supposedly relevant issues
Which
in
are
the university.
Controversial.
Yeah, controversial issues.
And just so the record shows, they're representative of the population, okay?
Unorthodox.
They're all unorthodox.
Unorthodox thinkers who have a good representation of the UA&P.
Yes, exactly. They
They
represent
come
the
from
school.
5 schools in different year levels.
They have scholars, varsities.
Varsity members, jocks.
Yes, and
Yeah.
An alumni.
So, are there ideas?
They want everyone to know that.
Are there ideas really orthodox? Unorthodox,
Do you
right?
even watch DR95, guys? Do you watch DR95? I tried watching DR95, and there was I was 5 minutes into it. The intro was really nice. It's really catchy, It's like unorthodox ideas from this speaker and that speaker, the introduction. The production is all good, the setting was nice. And then they started talking. And then I had to skip the entire thing, right?
Sad.
Oh, come on. I tried listening, but it was just insufferable. The things that they say are the things that you usually hear in person. If I just met you, those are the things that I will tell you. They're not really that heavy. You don't really have to think a lot to be able to say that.
Like, hi, kamusta ka? Okay lang.
To be fair, they bring in personal experiences and all that shit. But there's not really much of an analysis on what goes on in their life and what's controversial about it. What's so important about talking about relationships or talking about friendships?
I'm not really sure, but do they do it under an Opus Dei context? Because, in order for it to constitute as unorthodox, I think you should be bringing ideas that are not being taught by the university, right?
Yeah, that's probably right. But don't you think they'd be a bit more wary about what they say because they are representing the school to some extent? They're on Facebook,
If that's
YouTube.
the case, then you shouldn't brand yourself as unorthodox.
Yeah.
Because it contradicts your whole branding. I don't get what's so unorthodox about something that's already being taught to me by my class subjects.
But moreover, if you're conscious about it, then there's no controversy in your controversial ideas, right? Then you're just discussing ideas that everyone's comfortable with. There's no controversy.
Okay, so what I'm hearing here is you're saying they're not controversial enough. What do you think is missing from their podcast that's supposed to make the DR95 more relevant and controversial?
I don't know. Actual issues.
Actual issues such
Maybe
as
why haven't they talked about the bombing that's happening or the issues about Duterte? Those political issues that actually matter.
Or maybe COVID 2019. I don't
Yes,
know, really,
right?
no?
That's very informative, and it's also something that they could use in classes, right?
Okay, that makes sense. You're saying that we should look at bigger issues that involves more people in general. But usually they will talk about life, right? What I said earlier, they were talking about friendship and relationships, which happens to them. To be fair to their experiences, their experiences are completely valid. But when they share them, why do you think it doesn't make sufficient impact to make it qualify as controversial, something controversial?
It makes sense when you're ranting to a friend, So I had this relationship. Maybe some of the viewers would understand it, but that's not what we're trying to get at if you're doing a podcast. I think it would be more relevant if you talk about the dynamics of a relationship or the problems that undergo a relationship undergo. There are no specifics to it, or maybe it is too specific to their experience, which makes it less relevant to a broader scope of people. Or if you're gonna talk about relationships, maybe talk about what makes relationships work and what makes relationships totally tank. Okay, I'm trying to filter myself with the bad words, but like the point is.
It's okay. You can say anything.
Yeah. Okay.
You can say anything. You can filter
okay,
it
fine,
out.
But basically, you have to be a bit more specific about actual issues that go on in relationships. Like for instance, I don't know if it applies, but long distance relationships, or maybe trying to maintain relationships while being on a dean's list or something. I don't know.
That makes
Make
sense,
it
right?
a bit more specific, not just hi. So I had this experience in my
Yes.
past, and I want you to relate to it.
Yeah, and they're using this basic acting technique called yes and, in which they will just say, yeah, I agree with that, and then they will continue another story. But like that yes and will only work
That's so
if you're bringing in new material. But like it's the same version. It's another version of the same story. And by the way, long distance relationship sounds good, doesn't work.
They
Right?
do work under certain contexts. See,
Bullshit.
this is a point of contention between me and
Bullshit.
Billy. Oh no, Billy.
Long distance relationship never works, right?
But then, I think another problem is that in general, the flow that's presented to you by DR95 is incredibly misguided. Because at the end of the day, even by the time you reach the end of the podcast, it's just a discussion of certain people about very particular experiences, which never really ties back to anything wide that asserts its relevance into the UA&P community. For instance, they're not discussing the dating culture within UA&P or the relationship status of the university as a whole. They're discussing it within their own 5 contexts, which I feel like doesn't feel particularly relevant to the student body because it's not engaging. We aren't those 5 people. So unless you engage us on a cultural or like a more macro level meta type of analysis, it doesn't really matter that much.
So let's read some posts. I wasn't able to look at the original post of the DR95 from the Freedom Wall, but I managed to scoop up some posts on DFW that is somehow relevant. Alright, first post. Dear DR95, may we know the goals for having DR95? What is expected outcome for viewers? What is the point of having it? Maybe you'd also like to answer why DR95? Why have DR95? For some reason, Bosun articles have been a lot less lately. What's up, Bosun? So Bosun is, if you guys don't know, Bosun is the school publication of UA&P. And DR95 is under Bosun. It's like a project of Bosun to some extent. And there's some contention of why do we even need a podcast, right? I mean, maybe it's a good idea. Like I've also been, like what I said earlier, I've also been thinking of having a podcast for Polish where we talk about political issues. But since Bosun started their podcast, we kind of like shoved it in the back burner in case because we don't want to compete with them. They're awesome, right? So, what do you think are the goals of DR95? Then,
I think what they had in mind is to just have a free-flowing discussion of, I don't know, what they said, issues, right? But in execution, I think it's a whole different thing, right? We have these plans and we want to discuss our minds and all these stuff. But when they executed it, it just happens to be not much of a discussion.
Yeah, no, I get it.
It's just a narration of what they think is right, and it's just one thought that they all flow out. Like what you said, the yes and technique. So, I think their end goal really is to engage with the student population with these different issues. But of course, it's not, as he commented on, we don't think that we're satisfied with that discussion that's happening.
So, any engaging issues that you think Bosun ought to talk about as part of their main goals? Because right now, they're kind of all over the place. They're talking about very vague topics, right? Do you think if we localize the conversation to say something like the dress code, right? What's wrong with like showing some skin, all that stuff, right? And not just saying what's so wrong about showing some skin, but maybe coming from the side of the student, right? It's our chance to engage with the school, to tell them that, hey, actually, we want to wear looser, like more comfortable clothes so we can study better. Maybe. For girls, for guys, we want to wear shorts because our calves are awesome. We want to show off our calves and our hairy legs.
Wow, sana all.
Okay, let's read more comments. Okay. And if I may add to the DFW 18 blah 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 description, DR95, including its crew's responses, are all smug. DR95 hosts and crew should distinguish journalism from podcast production. We pay for journalism where standards of fact-checking and opinionated discussions are at its highest, not for amateur broadcast production. Okay, so first of all, they talked about the funds that's going to Bosun. Do you have any idea of how much we pay for the Bosun?
Around 200-ish.
200 per person.
Every person pays 200 pesos per
Okay.
semester.
And from my other sources, they said well, they don't really spend much on the podcast because they borrow the equipment, right? And most of their crew are like volunteers, so they don't need to pay them. All that shit. So do you think we're spending too much on Bosun's DR95? Because we don't really know much about like whether
How much?
they actually spend a lot of money on the podcast, or even like if the school is paying for it on the whole.
Even if we do spend, whether it be a big amount or a small amount, should we even have it in the very first place? But we answer this to a certain extent. We should have, like, there might be some importance to having a podcast, but if that podcast isn't even worth listening to, if you don't even have like that much viewers, or maybe if you do have viewers, they don't necessarily remember stuff that you put in there, maybe it's not a good investment.
Yeah, but like what is said here, right? It's like an amateur broadcast production, and the goal of the university is to actually like enrich us with those skills that open doors for us so we can explore our own interests. So, do you think it's worth our money to pay for these Bosun members to explore their own interest, and so then they can grow at it. So maybe someday they'll be able to produce a better quality material.
But if what you said was true, that they don't really pay for much of the equipment and whatever, and they provide it on their own, why is it necessary for them to use the Bosun name? Wouldn't that tarnish the very idea of a solid journalism, mechanism of like the school? Because if it's going to be about amateur discussions of like life issues and personal sob stories, then I don't think the school should be concerned with that.
Yes.
Do you agree with that, Scott?
But I think, like, moreover, right, the point of the whole Bosun budget is that unlike other organizations, the Bosun has a responsibility with the entire UA&P population. And I don't think it's fair that if the podcast that they make isn't something that engages us as a whole, that we all have to collectively pay for what they're doing.
So you're saying that it's their responsibility to actually try to engage us. But don't you think it's their attempt to engage the population by publishing a podcast, like another means of reaching out to the population? They're saying basically, hey, you don't really read our articles, but here's another way we can make our presence known for the student population.
Well, I think that's partially true, but then, because I think the only episode of DR95 that I ever watched to like a reasonable extent, like I think I got maybe about halfway through this one. It was their most recent podcast, which was about the creation of DR95 itself. And then in that podcast, there was someone who told the DR95 team that I think she said that she felt like the podcast wasn't representative enough of the UA&P community. And then the response, I think, coming in from Kyle was, rather than engaging in her frame, what he literally asserted was, more or less, he went on for 5 minutes saying was, I think it is. Because, like, it has these people, it has the jocks, it has people from all these courses, all these year levels, all of these, and I feel like, okay, that might be true, but if there are people who don't feel like that's the case, you can't invalidate it just based on your own feelings, right? Like, you can't just say that that fact isn't true and then like not engage on their frame. That's a terrible way of looking at anything.
So maybe let's engage on that frame, right? If Kyle is saying that, well, we have all these people, we have like a diverse group of hosts. Why do you think the person who posted this comment saying that they're not representative of the population, where do you think this post is coming from?
I think it's coming from a standpoint of not too much privilege. I mean, you think about it, the people at DR95 hold a certain amount of privilege, meaning they are accomplished students, they have a position at school. So obviously, the people who aren't really, out there aren't really represented either, which is like a huge bulk of the student population.
So you're saying that we should like pull some random guy out of the population and invite them to speak about maybe themselves, their views about the school?
Why not?
Well, maybe if they can relate to the topic, then why not?
Okay, so you're saying there's not enough experts about certain things that are like being talked about in DR95 that are like participating in their podcast.
I mean, for me, I think like the bigger issue is more of like how, I think you said this a while ago, is this idea of that whole yes and technique. Because at the end of the day, all of the people who are like in that circle, they have a very like similar set of views. They're not giving that whole orthodox perspective that like they promise. So I think if you wanted to fix the way DR95 works, you need to find people that disagree. Because that's what makes podcasts interesting, right? When people disagree about discussions so that you get more perspectives. Because at the end of the day, there's nothing unorthodox about a bunch of people agreeing. And moreover, all of these people who are agreeing cannot ever accurately represent the UA&P community. Because the UA&P community has such a diverse set of perspectives. We don't all collectively agree on everything. That's why like whenever Kasangara releases their polls and stuff, you'll find people disagreeing about whether death penalty is good or bad, whether divorce is good or bad, regardless of what the university teaches you. When you have things like the elections, right? You're able to see the Dragon's Freedom Wall going sprack at you about all of these things. Even regarding the very issues that DR95 tries to bring up, if you check other places, the UA&P community is far from being as uniform in their opinions as DR95 likes to suggest.
So what I'm hearing here is that the post isn't really coming from like who gets from the perspective of who gets to be on the show, but rather diversity of ideas rather than diversity of personalities. Is that what we're trying to say here?
Yeah.
So it's like rather than just simply agreeing and building up on what people say on the show, maybe they can say, well, actually I disagree with what you're trying to say and try to bring in a different perspective, even though they don't believe in it.
Speak for people who cannot be heard. Those who have differing opinions, no matter how differing it is.
They don't really have to consider it personally, but I think they have to try and look at their perspective.
As a representative of the student population.
No, I get it.